You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
Other non-negotiables: learning how to work with other people, be on a team, delay gratification, work hard, suffer, practice in the dark. You got to do all those things. We have Julie and I have written a brand new book out April 4th called Built to Move. Athletes that feel better, perform better. So a lot of times I think what we need to do as parents is say, hey, this is what it means to be a human. You need to eat fruits and vegetables, and you have to eat protein, you have to sleep. Those are non-negotiables. So when you get culture and people feel safe and they feel respected and they feel like they have ownership and pride, man, it's a lot easier to win in those situations. And that ultimately speed is the thing that is the lie detector test. Learning of self through the adversity of sport. It's just not the lessons you think you're gonna learn. You really are seeing is that we're using sport to teach movement skills. And that is a side effect of sport, but that wasn't the intention of sport. This is Kelly Starrett, and you're listening to Airey Brothers Radio. What's going on?
KStarr, how are you, sir?
Nice to see you, buddy.
Happy New Year.
Also to you, just so we can clear things out. Missing a tooth, so no one needs to freak out.
It happens. I have 4 dental implants in the front across the top, so.
This is my second one. We're going down the rabbit hole. So you know how these things go. They gave me a fake tooth, but I hate it and I lost it. So now I'm just waiting to get my fake mono tooth. They'll give me the single tooth that'll last 3 months again.
Are you going to do an implant or?
I already did. Oh yeah.
Oh, you did.
It's just another chance to destroy my sense of self-importance, ego. Just check it. My kids, I don't know if you guys know about these high school kids, but you know what Riz is? Riz.
I've heard it lately, but I teach high school again, so I haven't picked up on it.
Riz is your ability to pull someone from the opposite sex.
Okay.
Right. And so there's W Riz, winning Riz, and then there's losing Riz. And I got the L Riz right now, they said.
Okay.
I'm right there with you, sir. So do you have a cool story behind that, or is it just bad dental work?
Oh man, I wish when I was 12 years old, we were playing crack the whip. I grew up in Germany and we went ice skating all the time, and I just landed on my face. My feet went out and I couldn't get my hands up fast enough, and broke both my teeth. And then I've just gone down this path of I've had every cap, root canal, crown, implant, it's really like a lot of people love to spend their money on things you can see, like cars or roofs for your house that no one can see. This is just like the amount of time and energy I've spent. Here's what you need to know about this thing. This is why I'm so scarred about it. I'm 18 years old. I finally am old enough, maybe I'm 19, to get the crowns, get rid of those caps that I kept knocking off. And they're like, your teeth have matured, it's time. The smoking hottest dental hygienist in college ever was this girl with these green eyes and red hair. And she stared into my face with a dental dam. It was the first time I'd used a dental dam. And I guarantee you, like, I'm scarred from that moment, because I was like, here is the mother of my children. This woman is the most beautiful. She already has a job. Like, oh, she has and she's got these piercing eyes. And then here I am with this dental dam. And I was like, it's never going to work. She'll never look at me the same way. So I'm trying to get over that.
Well, I feel your pain. Like I said, I have 4 implants up top and 1 on each backside. And I have a very similar story where I had a very beautiful dentist. And I said, when she was doing the stuff, the 1 implant, I said to her, on a scale of one to meth, how bad is my mouth compared to what you've seen? And she's like, oh, you're good. Don't worry about it. I've seen way worse. So
oh, good. It's always about not being the worst. I mean, I think that's really, if we can just establish that in the room, I'm not the worst, The problem is, like, I got the buck tooth and then I knocked it out like 100 times. It got so bad that the dentist just gave me the epoxy this last time. He's like, just glue it back in yourself. We can't keep having you come back in here. So anyway, again, if this is my cross to bear, here I am, just rocking the tooth and doing what I can do.
Well, you're pulling it off, sir, so I wouldn't sweat it.
What I love to do is kind of smile at like children and then freaking, flash them and just see how they respond. So anyway, thanks for having me on, lads.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. It's an honor and a pleasure. We were um, fans of yours since I like to say we are MWOD OGs. We've been fans of yours for a very long time, so it's an honor and a pleasure to talk to you and about your journey and what you got going on now, and yeah, just have an epic conversation with you.
Awesome.
Well, I not to correct you, Rich, but I think we are fans since the days of the journal and the Quad Dipsy video that KStarr did, and showing CrossFit San Francisco, us being kids from the Jersey Shore, not necessarily surfers, but growing up on surf skate videos, all our friends, the CrossFit Journal definitely had that vibe. And then go to CrossFit San Francisco, and you guys are outside and you got tarps and everything. And that was our vibe. We're like, oh my God, this is it. He's out there doing it. And then to see, I believe it was this year, you guys closed CrossFit San Francisco down. So what was that like for you, being a part of that for 15 years and CrossFit being a big part of your journey?
We closed it in 2020. And so I've had a little bit of time to heal. This November was 2 years, believe it or not. First of all, is that place, there are times where there's real specialness in the world for whatever reason, the time, the place, the people. In art, they call it a happening. There's some magic there. And we definitely had some magic going on. And it felt like we were in this really rich exploratory time where all of us were hyper creative, and we had so many brilliant coaches there, and people would come, and our friends, it was really represented a new dawning of an age of share, of test, of innovate, of integrate that really hadn't been there before, right? If everyone can remember that far back. And it's difficult to remember, but you couldn't buy Olympic lifting shoes easily. You had to I got these VS athletic ones, those were my first shoes. And I think I bought them out of the back of someone's car. It really felt like it was different. And then the fact that it was gritty there, because we were outside, we had this Taj Mahal porta potties, we were exposed to the elements. It really made it clear about why we were there and why people were there. And it wasn't the facility, and it wasn't the beyond the whiteboard tracking apps. It was this model of, hey, we're committing to show up, and as coaches, we better bring our A game and really give people an incredible experience and develop this trust. And what's amazing is that as we start to integrate physical therapy into that practice, is we're then kind of gifted the opportunity to work with more and more incredible teams and organizations in different sports. We get to kind of come back home and reintegrate and resynthesize and iterate. What we're seeing now is a normal expression of the system of fitness, where things have gotten really mature and very polished, and the tolerances are super tight, and it's really hard to innovate. What you're seeing now is it's easier to talk crap on someone else and talk about yourself, because people aren't really left with a lot of places to integrate or innovate or create sort of new lanes for themselves, right? And subsequently, I think, I don't want to pine for the old days where I was cold and, we didn't have walls, but there was a moment where it was not all so known and written, and we didn't have such an overwhelming volume of materials and noise. There was a lot less noise. And so you could kind of understand a little bit more effectively. With that being said, we are seeing that coaches and athletes now are an order of magnitude more sophisticated, and our people are getting a better product faster. On the other hand, there's a lot less play. There's a lot less we've lost the narrative of why we're training in the first place. That gym culture and physical culture, for lack of a better phrase, has become sort of ethos or entertainment unto itself. It's my identity. It's my core relationship, not a thing I do so I can do something else. And I think, let's take from the old days what we loved, and let's take from the new days, and again, ask the question, are we faster, stronger? Are we less depressed? Are we less addicted to drugs and alcohol? Are we less I think we really need to ask these questions. How are we doing? Because we've gotten an order of magnitude more sophisticated. And we're sure is everyone's making a lot more money. There's $1 trillion industry here, but I'm not sure we are happier people, right? Except that you can buy a kettlebell and bumper plates at Walmart. And maybe that's what it was all about in the first place.
With that being said, the innovation and everything, and seeing and being outdoors and seeing what that experience is like, how did the whole journey evolve for you within the walls or within the fence, from like those OG kind of 3-on 1-off type of mindset and philosophy and training to when you decided to close in November 2020? What was that evolution like, and what did maybe like some of those early programs were? Because even within that, in the early days, I remember you had a very unique sort of philosophy, and I believe, if memory serves me, each coach kind of programmed their own workouts, as opposed to like what you see sometimes where it's like one workout for the entire day for the entire community.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, I think, when we're talking about programming, we're talking about programming to your community. So first and foremost, I think it's important that we understand we define the parameters. What a coach should be doing is coaching for hyper-local events. Hyper-locality is, I know you and your demands and what you want to get done and what equipment I have and how much time and your training experience and injuries, et cetera, right? So what ends up happening sometimes when we try to expand that to the masses, we try to raise that up at scales, that we lose some of the sensitivity. Now, good coaching, always, a coach will have a plan, right? We work in universities, we work in national teams. And then within the plan, there's a lot of changes based on what the athlete needs. Injury history, certain positions they want to work on, et cetera. So early on in the original CrossFit model, there was like 3 days on, 1 day off. But if you owned a gym, that didn't work because you have a gym. So that model got immediately thrown out. What we saw was, well, how are we going to meet the needs of people who may be coming 5 days a week, or maybe coming 6 days a week, or maybe come, every other day? And what you realize is you can't control for a lot of that. What our original model is that, Adrian and I did our own programming, and then we get together and kind of talk about, hey, here are some days, here's what I want to do. And then you'd fit in your program around that. And what was great about that for our early days in coaching was we were protected by the fact that no one was very strong, no one was very fit, and no one was very skilled. And so it didn't matter, honestly, what people need. Do they need to run? Yeah. Does it matter if it's 30 seconds, 45 seconds? Doesn't matter. We need to work on running, right? Is it 400, 800s? Really? Is that the limiting factor to your general fitness? Is running a 400 or 800? Doesn't matter. You need to run. So we were protected early on in that model. What we got was coaches who had to eat their cooking and had an immediate reaction to inputs and outputs. And so we could make changes and innovate and play around. And we saw a lot of ideas, even at the CrossFit Games this year, led by Adrian Bosman on the programming. You saw ideas from our gym that were very, very old, from us making our own sleds and carrying things and doing our man test, quote unquote, where we walked across and did a dip and walked across the bars. And what you saw was a lot of play where we could use the gym as a time for exploration. And now certainly programming is very dense and very good towards very specific goals. But one of the things we see is that there's not a lot of joy innovation in the programming necessarily. It's A1, A2, A3. Now I do my strength piece. Now I've done my strength piece. Now I need to, and it feels very rote in a lot of ways. Not that there doesn't mean that we don't need structure and overall idea. I think that's, this idea that you're going to show up, you have to be very unskilled. You have to be very unfit and very unstrong for just, hey, do a bunch of work and that will take care of your fitness. That still exists if you're an absolute beginner. I think it doesn't matter what you do. You can go to P90X or get on this Soul Cycle and you'll get better at something, right? But I think generally what we saw was that, okay, early on, as we're integrating these ideas, what are our metrics? What are our key returns on investment? How are we evaluating the efficacy of our programming? Are people getting fitter at what distance? Are they becoming more skilled at what movements? Are they getting stronger? Again, what movements? And ultimately, to the question is, one of the things we started to identify was, hey, there are these root positions that were challenging. And I think if you've ever heard of West Side Barbell, you understand this idea of conjugate training, which is, here's a squat. We're going to squat twice a week, but this week we're squatting with this bar. This week we're squatting with this stance and this depth in this bar. And they kept mixing it up. It always is the squat. Well, suddenly, if you look at that and you're like air squat, wall ball, overhead squat, front squat, power clean, right? They're all iterations of squatting. And what you saw was we had a lot of variability in the programming, but not on the basic positions. And so there was a lot to get done in terms of developing people's positions and shapes. And what we started to see underneath all the noise is, again, we're starting to be exposed to West Side and more Olympic lifting and gymnastics training and running training programs, is that we can see these essential positions that every human being needs to be able to be in. You need to be able to take your shoulder into extension and into rotation if you want it to be effective. If you want to run effectively or swim effectively or do whatever you want to do. And simultaneously, then I can free, because I can say, well, what tools do I want to use as a coach to reinforce these positions? And tools can be exercises. Tools can be, hey, here's how I'm going to challenge your position with just base conditioning like burpees, or I'm going to challenge it with a barbell or kettlebell or a dumbbell, or I can say, let's challenge this with you breathing hard. Get on this assault bike, hold your breath, then come over here and do this, right? Suddenly I can add speed to a movement. I can add metabolic demand to a movement. I can add competition or change. All of a sudden, what we realize is that we have a million tools to challenge these root positions. And I challenge anyone to go into the internet and watch some exercise that someone's doing on Instagram and try to figure out what root position are they working on and what aspect of that position, what control are they using to challenge that position. And it's really difficult to understand sometimes. So we started to come up with a model of understanding what was essential. And then very quickly, we could see if people could access those positions or not. And our programming starts to evolve to say, here's what's essential. Here's how we're going to regress and progress movements. And here's why we're going to ditch some of these other skill transfer exercises, because they don't actually solve the problem. So a lot of skill transfer drills where a coach's model or a coach's attempt at improving a position without necessarily asking, can an athlete get into this position? It was always about, well, it must be a skill, not, hey, I'm missing the ability to put my arms over my head. So we started to restore those positions. Plus, we had all of this tooling in our own gym language to work on what we wanted to work on. And ultimately, the thing that we came back to was, what is it you want to do? Have abs? Simple, right? That's a very different conversation than I need to run faster. I need to win a world championship. I need to have enough energy that I can still go play a sport, et cetera, et cetera. That continued to evolve until we shut the gym down.
Talking about regression and progression of movement, and I know you got into CrossFit and being a PT because you were an athlete who got hurt. And I've heard you talk about how as athletes, we kind of take it as a badge of honor, like, oh, I can't do this anymore because I broke myself off, right? And I think dealing with athletes, it's kind of hard to do that regression, progression, especially with competitive athletes. How did you find, running the gym for all those years, working with some of the athletes you've worked with? How do you introduce that either to middle schoolers, beginning athletes, or elite athletes?
Some of this has to be making sure that everyone understands what the goal is. So I'm working with a really good surfer right now that everyone's heard of. And the goal is for that person to surf better in competition. They're a month out from the World Cup, doing their thing in the tour. And the only goal is, in this sports preparation training phase, can this person surf more? Does their surfing improve? How do we support your surfing? That's the only goal. So all of the conversations and tensions are towards this metric. Some of it's very subjective, right? It's hard to win world championships. But some of it is, hey, I was able to surf longer, or I was able to get more waves, or my sleep. We can still pull out our objectives. It's important that when you go in and you're working with people for the first time, middle schoolers, that they understand what the goal of the session is. You can then say, hey, here's what we're going to work on today. And we're hyper transparent. Does everyone understand the goal? And here's how the goal matters to you, how it's going to make the thing that you care about better. Some of it may just be, hey, this was super fun because I'm working with kids and I just want to be fun, and I'll hide the vegetables in the sauce, right? That's a model. The other thing, though, is if I'm working right now with the women's water polo team at Cal, and having them understand what my thinking is to support the coaches, it means I need to make sure that it's easier for the athletes to do what the coach wants them to do. I need to make sure it's easier for the athletes to understand what the strength coach wants them to do. And then how does the recovery practices all kind of knit together? So again, part of the narrative here is making sure that people understand the goal. And as a coach, you can't give everyone the fire hose. We're working on eccentric loading or tissue health or springiness or cardiorespiratory demand or CO2 tolerance and strength. And some of it is, but people are like, hey, I just want to be stronger and not have back pain and feel less gross, right? Those are all reasonable goals. But in that context, I think when we do a better job of communicating what our intention is, and still in that conversation with someone, right? Expert clinicianship or expert coaching is always a compromise between what the coach thinks is best and what the athlete thinks is best. And if the goal is general physical preparedness, then I need to make sure that that person has fun, breathes hard, becomes a little metabolically more intact, and gets a little stronger, works on their positions and that pain. That's very different than sports preparation training. And there's a line there where suddenly, if I'm in a sports preparation training phase, I'm paying attention to foot pressure and ankle placement and how well do these movements transfer, and can my athletes still go do their sport, and can I do that? That's the off season. The in season, again, is that sports specific training, which is the goal is to win a national championship. Everything is geared towards that goal. So it's useful as a coach to be asking, well, do I have Olympians in the same class as this middle-aged dude without a tooth who wants to just look a little bit better naked? That is not the same thing. We're going to do squats, sure, but the language of that whole movement process is going to look differently, and our KPIs are absolutely going to look differently. The good coach, though, should be able to slip in between those things so we can regress what is essential, how do I progress that movement all the way up so that my Olympic bobsledder, Kaylee Humphreys, can go win another world title, right? So I should be able to turn my thinking up and down in terms of what's essential in positions to meet the needs of the person in front of me. And that may mean, hey, we need to talk about your sleep and your crappy diet and the stress in your life. And it has nothing to do with how many watts you can hold nose only on the bike.
With that being said, you've worked with so many across the board with so many different athletes, teams, sports. Is there one particular sport or maybe not individual, but a particular sport that maybe presented the most unique challenge to you, and that maybe you had took you some time to kind of wrap your head around the progression of improvement?
Well, I think because I have a model for understanding complex movement, that's what Supple Leopard is. It's not a book about mobilizations. It's an integrated model for understanding complex movement behavior. That's what it is. Using strength and conditioning as a diagnostic tool language, right? Because it's really hard to hide your range of motion limitations. So my two objective measures always are biomotor output. Can you go faster? Can you do it more effectively at a less cost, right? That's biomotor output. And simultaneously, it's range of motion. Those are the two things. Unequivocally, can you generate more force or wattage or poundage? And, right, do you have access to your native ranges? Those are the two hearts of the model. what I'll say is that something like the CrossFit Games is interesting intellectually because you have athletes who are becoming very, very strong and very, very skilled and now have to handle freakish volumes. So what does that look like? And again, are they world-class swimmers and runners? Probably not. World-class bikers? Probably not. But, you know, in terms of being competent in the movement efficiency, we're starting to see people be, you know, decent at running a 5K, you know, and being able to snatch 300 pounds. So the CrossFit piece is interesting because as a CrossFit coach, I had to become competent enough to understand basic gymnastics, Olympic lifting, barbell movements, some of the basic monostructural stuff, and see what was essential in those shapes. And then how do I manage all that volume? And again, today, let me just say, kind of put a cap on that, that I would say that my critique of CrossFit continues at the highest level. I'm not talking about your gym, good or bad. You know, I think I will say I know a ton of CrossFit athlete coaches who are some of the best coaches I've ever met on the planet, who can also coach other things. But, you know, you can't be an elite CrossFitter and then do a whole other sport unless you stop doing that sport. And we've seen that with Tia, you know, Tia Claire Toomey, you know, qualified a bobsled for the Olympics last year. I mean, she had to like get stronger, let some of her fitness come back. And then she was able to, you know, she's an extraordinary athlete. But you can't train for the CrossFit Games and go play in the NFL. Those things are mutually exclusive, right? That I think that's or run 100 miles. You can't do that. You can't do those things. So what's interesting for me is less than, you know, like I think Olympic lifting taught me the most about the body because these shapes pretty much are universal in terms of some of the exposure, and that ultimately speed is the thing that is the lie detector test. Your shape works at low load, low speed, but does not work at high load, high speed. For us, that may be a less effective shape and position. And, you know, when we're working alongside, you know, George St. Pierre, in his last fight, you know, coming up, you know, my job now and role is not to come in and do the day-to-day programming. If I'm working with Stuart McMillan of Altus Track and Field, my job is, and we're you know, working with an athlete, is to support that coach's role with my piece, which is looking at positions, looking at pain, looking at improving the efficiency and the economy of the motion of the athletes he's doing. I tend not to take the lead on programming because people are so good at it. So I can work alongside someone like Dave Spitz of Cal Strength, going to the Olympics with Wes Kitts, to support him, to give him ideas on movements that will support or improve his athletes' positions, plus all the recovery and injury and stuff like that. But he's an expert in getting people to the Olympics. I just programmed the last Summer Olympics. I programmed for a couple of Olympic rowers, you know, and going to the Olympics. And that was the first time I'd taken the lead on programming plus all those other things. It was very exciting. Turns out I could do it, but it's not the thing that gets me going around. What I continue to love is dropping into a new universe and trying to make sense of what is essential and trying to help the coaches and the athletes working in that environment to do what they can do better. How do I make it so the athlete is ready to be coached and that so the athlete can perform the way she needs to perform? That is really interesting. So, you know, to your point, you know, what's really fun again is, you know, hanging out with World Cup skiers is different than hanging out with, you know, baseball players is different than, you know, everyone has their unique community. And oftentimes it's the fact that I get to go back and forth between so many communities that allows me to see the holes or see the opportunities to make this group of people more effective.
You said you really enjoy the, you know, dropping into these different universes and trying to, you know, put the puzzle together where you can improve. And Jimmy and I are both former wrestlers. So I'm curious, you know, because then I'm coaching wrestling now too, and I'm constantly correcting posture and position. You know, you often see, even sometimes with fighters too, with the rounded shoulders and some of that sort of stuff. Have you ever dropped into that universe at all, or worked with any high level, either freestyle or collegiate wrestlers, and try to figure out that, piece with the posture?
Only MMA fighters, honestly.
Yeah.
But one of the things you see is there are plenty of shapes that are adopted by the sport out of necessity. You're going to have to get small and bring everything in. You're going to have to do that. The question is, how do I then support that person tissue physiology and then make it so that person doesn't become a hunchback the rest of their life, right? Theoretically, we ask the question, can you come out of this intact? What does that mean? Well, if I work in ballet, for example, and I do, my ballet dancers don't walk around feet turned out all the time. That's an aesthetic towards ballet. Then they squat and jump and land and practice feet straight so we can give them movement choice. What we're trying to do is not have some of these postures which may serve a specific position, like being in an aerodynamic position on a bike in the Tour de France. That's not a great position to generate huge amounts of power. It's a great position to be more effective in being aerodynamic. One of the things we work on with those athletes is where's the trade-off between your aero position and how that aero position starts to decay your force production. So what I'll say is, one of the things we know from working with Olympic rowers is that as soon as your back starts to round massively, you have less functional control of your shoulders. Your shoulders don't work as well when your arms are attached to a C-shaped body. They work fine, but not as well. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is say, hey, how much of that is required for the sport? How can we maximize these relationships so that we don't just start turning light switches off to achieve a position? Because that's what people will do to solve a movement problem, right? And you'll see that a lot of times I don't have to adopt that fully rounded position. That's just the position I learned. That if I'm breathing a lot more, and man, look at how some of the other more styles of fighting or wrestling go up. Turns out you can't take a big breath in a rounded position. You can't throw someone in a rounded position. You can't, right? You can't jump your highest. So what we're trying to do ostensibly is say, I want to give you as an athlete as much movement choice as you can have, as you need to solve the demands of your sport. But what we see is it's really difficult as a coach, as you're seeing, especially with kids who maybe don't have movement histories, don't have a training age, right? They can fold themselves up into origami shapes, but that's the only shape they know how to get into. That's why having a movement practice got so many people so far. So doing Pilates, man, that really helped a lot of people because they had to adopt and learn another way of moving and rotating. Yoga, really effective at exposing people to fundamental positions, root shapes, key rotations, but not necessarily, I can't have my athletes go do an hour of yoga every day. So enter the weight room where suddenly strict pull-ups and handstands and pressing overhead, those are great ways, muscle snatches, to make sure that our athletes have the language of full function of the shoulder on a spine that's more organized to handle that axial load. And it's really easy for me to say, oh, that's not a choice. You're in the only position you can achieve right now. I want you to have multiple options and then choose the one that allows you to solve the problem more effectively.
The origami comment is just making me laugh because it's unfortunately, again, like you said, there's some people that don't even have a training age, and that's kind of been the hardest thing to get back into, wrapping my head around and getting back into coaching with youth sports again, is that I've got to dial so many things back to my verbiage, my explanations, and everything is just, even it's beyond elementary because unfortunately so many children today are so deconditioned.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit more. And pardon me, Jimmy, just because what that you really are seeing is that we're using sport to teach movement skills. And that is a side effect of sport, but that wasn't the intention of sport. if you're sending your child to do a sport and they don't know how to control themselves in any kind of gravity space, you're now asking that coach to teach your child to play soccer, to manage all of the elements that go along with competing, and you're trying to teach them to jump and land and decelerate on a single leg. Like, is that now the demand of every youth coach? We also have to expand the role of the youth coach to teach kids everything. Well, then we need a lot more contact time in order to get the kids proficient. We're seeing injury rates just continue to accelerate. Why? Well, as you're pointing out, kids oftentimes don't have access to the same level of physical exposure. We used to do that a lot more by saying play a lot of sports. And so a lot of us who grew up, in the 70s, just rode our bikes and played everything all the time. I'm sure I would have been on the iPhone, on TikTok, doing that stuff too. Now we have to teach formal movement skills. Do you remember that the Russians used to assess their athletes by having them jump off a ladder, right? How simple is that? Well, that's called playing. That's jumping off the playground. And they could tell if kids had the motor control, movement to control, jumping off the ladder to move to the next phase. But what we're seeing now is that kids, jump off the ladder and get broken, they injure themselves. But then we're like, okay, now it's time to learn a complex movement skill on top of your inability to jump up off the ladder. So, kudos to every coach out there, because we're gonna have to expand the role of the youth coach and get these kids the resources they need and the exposure they need in a way that they want to do it, so that we can actually get them ready to be able to learn some of these fundamental positions.
Going off of that, Kelly, do you think there's a way to bring those fundamental movements into gym class, right? Instead of playing dodgeball and stuff, we had Ron Jones on and Doug Orchard. They did the motivation factor about the JFK fitness program back in the 70s. How do we implement that into the schools? And is that the way for our sports to kind of grow, to have more of a baseline training before we jump kids into soccer at rec at age 5 or whatever it is?
Well, let's start with looking at the current state of the union, right? How's it going? Well, we're seeing that a lot of kids participate and they stop participating. So that's a ding on us, right? By 18, the numbers are pretty dismal. But 14, we got a lot of participation. I think if we look at some of the injury rates, like FIFA, not the greatest organization, but identified that they had a real problem with injuries in their sports and started putting in some simple ACL reduction activities. And those kids who did those things, even poorly, just did the 12-minute warm-up, jump on one leg, those things, saw massive reduction in lower extremity injuries. And so what we're seeing is, okay, there's a need, which is kids may not have the tissue strength or the sleep or the nutrition or the movement skills to carry this. Where and who owns this problem? That's really the question, right? And what muddled that up, of course, was now, Johnny has this elite strength and conditioning coach. You're like, dude, Johnny can't hold a plank and take a breath or run 800 meters. I mean, it's sort of shocking. So you really bring up this excellent point, is what do we owe as a society to children in terms of movement literacy and movement competence? I just was talking to a coach at a school, and they've just made this compulsory so that kids have to take a movement class in their high school. That could be weightlifting, that could be yoga, that could be dance. They gave kids a choice, but the kid had to do something. And I think what we need to do is start to say, not just give lip service to cardiorespiratory demand and like heart health, like solving obesity is not the role of physical education in high school or middle school. What we need to do is start to say, parents, we're going to need to decentralize this. If you have a squat rack in your backyard, it's important that you teach all of the neighbor kids how to squat. So at that hyper-local house level, then we need to have some really good coaches in PE teaching skills that if you can't do downward dog or hang from a pull-up bar or swing a kettlebell, you don't get to progress to the next grade, Johnny. Like, that is you can't write, you can't do math, you can't control your body in space. we're going to have to start somewhere with that. And I think what's shocking is that we have such opportunity to transform people's lives. And if you look at some of those high schools early on that use those fitness programs, people love this learning. My uncle was head track coach of the year in Washington, head football coach, and he taught like a step dance aerobics class to all the kids who didn't want to do a certain sport. They would come in, and man, he would dance with those women for an hour, largely women. And then, lo and behold, it transformed their lives. So you're really asking the right question. Who owns this? How do we solve this problem? And as a parent, wait for it, I can't just outsource it. I'm going to need to make sure that if I'm going to teach my kids how to do math and eat breakfast and self-soothe and clean themselves, turns out getting up and down off the ground or some of these basic skills are part of what it means to be a human being. And that can start by putting in the walking mile every day. We just need you to walk more. I mean, there's so many ways where we can begin to skin that, but you're really nailing it. And you guys are at the tip of the spear of that. You're like, wow, what is going on? How are we going to solve this so that we can have people who know how to care for themselves later on? I'll say that two of the things that I'm most proud about, I'll tell you two stories. My senior daughter now, Georgia, knows how to program and lift and power snatch and deadlift and run, and she plays water polo. She knows how to cook, right? She knows what to fuel for an event. I'm like, oh, she can go off. Like literally, I walked in the door the other night, she's back squatting in the garage, right? She's like, I just felt like back squatting, right? Doesn't need to warm up and cool down. And like she's 17, she's made of rubber, right? She moves well. She could just do that. And I was like, wow, look, my 17-year-old daughter knows how to back squat, and she's obsessed with having a big, strong booty. And I'm like, I can help, right? So I also have this other daughter. Last year was at the Olympic Development Camp in Colorado Springs, and they put these kids in, they did like 11 sessions in 3 days or 4 days. It was an insane number of like 2-hour sessions. And my daughter plays goalie. And guess what? After she threw the ball for this 1,000th time, her right shoulder started to ache. Why? Because she was playing water polo, but not playing crazy volume camp day after day, 3 sessions, 4 sessions a day water polo. And her arm starts to ache. So she correctly gets out of the pool, says, I need to take a break. They're like, go talk to the physio. And the physio says, put a bag of ice on it. My daughter's like, are you fucking serious? That's some bullshit. Like, what a lazy response. Pardon my swearing. So then she goes home, calls me. She's got a Mark Pro. She decongests, does isometrics. She does some gua sha. She does some end range stuff. And boom, she's back in the pool next day, no pain. So if my 13-year-old daughter can manage her new shoulder pain away at a sleepaway camp at the Olympic Training Center, there's no reason everyone else can't do that. Give her a bag of ice, please.
She's like, do you know who the hell I am?
You make me feel like an old man, because I remember during the MWOD days, they were tykes back in the day. So you're dating me right now.
I feel you. You know, what's really interesting is I ask a lot of world-class coaches, what's the longest you've ever coached an athlete? So let me give you an example. Stuart McMillan and Kaylee Humphreys. Kaylee is the best bobsledder in the world, best bobsledder driver in the world. She's the GOAT. All the Olympic medals, 4 Olympics, I think, maybe 4 or 5. And her coach has been her coach from her first Olympics, before her first Olympics. So they've had this time together, and he owns 100% of the experience. Every injury, every problem, every poor technique, he can see it, right? And together she owns 50% of the process. Don't get me wrong, right? That's a mistake. People like, it's not your coach. You better own your half. But together they have worked on this miraculous thing for over a decade, almost 2 decades. And oftentimes coaches don't own their cooking. Right? You worked with an athlete for 2 years or 1 year. I'm like, you don't really truly know the inputs and outputs. And if you work with mutants, it's even more confusing, because you give a mutant a little nudge and poof, they get 10% better, and you haven't done anything. You just got the mutant out of the way of their own mutant self. But when you have children, that is a transitional, foundational idea. Want to see how good you are as a coach? How old do your kids move? How old do they eat? How well, and look, it's difficult being a parent and coach. I have made my kids cry more times than I am proud to admit, trying to teach them to Olympic lift, comma, my kids can all power snatch, right? And do all of these things. And I'm not a gnarly dad, like get out there and snatch, no dessert. But what I want you to understand is if you really are owning your process, your seniors should move better than they did when they were freshmen, and start to inform the freshmen, this is what we do, so that we can now kind of have a more complete cycle. And there's no better cycle than, hey, I don't even know if I want my kids to play in college. I think that's a really sketchy goal. Like I have one daughter, my youngest is like, I'm playing in college. I'm like, that's your dream. Let's do it. My other daughter's like, I'm going to go make money. Why would I be an athlete in college? She's like, this is crazy. But what I'll tell you is that, you know, both of them are prepared to move and eat and fuel and self-soothe. And I think that's what we want to do. And I can look at those girls and say, okay, I think we could have done better here, or done better there.
That's a beautiful thing. That's, you know, I always often hear people say, well, we can't not do this because we have kids, or I can't not have snacks in my house because I have kids. Or so oftentimes too, you see, you know, there's 3 kids and mother and father, and there's 4 different meals being prepared. And so to hear that sort of stuff is amazing. I'm curious, because it feels like it's such a California thing, but how do kids get into water polo?
Step 1, does your high school have a water polo team, right? Well, there's probably a water polo club around, and there's probably a youth development program there. And that's the place to start. You need to know people who do water polo. And look, I'm just going to unabashedly say it's the greatest sport for women I've ever met. It's one of my favorite sports. It's so brutally hard that the price of admission is competence moving yourself in the environment. Then you have to have this wicked hand-eye coordination, and you need to battle other people. So we get wrestling, we get monostructural work. It's not an accident that my daughter was one of the gnarliest defenders, and also maybe studied Muay Thai. Maybe those things went together, maybe they didn't. You know, both my kids have a rocket arm, and everyone's like, where'd they get that rocket arm? I'm like, 3 words, power snatch, bitches. We have been swinging kettlebells and snatching the barbell since my children were tiny. They had these little tiny barbells. Fundamental pattern, repeated, and then lots of exposure. But it's this, look, I'm going to sound terrible. I've already broken my idea of not swearing, but one of the things is that there are sports where there can be a lot of drama among youth people and their parents. What I'll tell you is that water polo is so difficult that we see very little left over for drama. My daughters are like, wow, this is the most drama-free sport we've ever been. There's drama because, you know, put a bunch of young fighter women together, you're gonna, you know, sometimes see some rubbing, but compared to some other sports, because it's so difficult, it kind of meets all my needs, you know. And really, as we get back to this essentialism about CrossFit as a training modality or an ideology, you know, one of the things I think we've started to see now is if you don't have an aerobic-based sport in your life early on as a kid, it's really hard to catch up. There are mutants out there, but man, you know those people who are, hey, I played college soccer, and then they just can destroy you their whole lives. You're like, why are you so good? You haven't played college soccer in 10 years. They're like, well, you know, they flex that muscle and develop those capacities at an early age. Hand-eye coordination, sliding, being able to control your body in space, control your own other objects. Suddenly you're like, oh, this is the essentials of what it means to be human, and why wrestling is still probably the greatest sport on earth, because you have to be fit, you have to listen, you have to understand, you have to have body control, you have to be powerful, right? And you get immediate feedback when it doesn't work. You know, I mean, like, talk about a way of transforming society, you know, wrestling.
Agree with Rich to hear you say that your daughter's movement and their diet is something that you're in charge of, or at least part of. That warms my heart, because I think through all this, you know, being athletes, but because, you know, we wanted to get better at athletes, we went to CrossFit, then MWOD, and then other stuff. And then, you know, it's a holistic thing, right? It goes back to you as a human and how you are as a human. And the question I had for you before was seeing all the different people that you've seen move and the different injuries you've worked with. Do you find a correlation I'm going to get woo-woo here, but do you find a correlation? Me and Rich always joke there's a Paul Chek quote out there like, oh, your shoulder hurts because your daddy issues. Do you find a correlation with certain personalities might have certain movement pattern issues, or, you know, certain issues that people aren't dealing with might directly go to, all right, you have a bad ankle or something like that? Or is that a little too out there for you?
I think we could slice that up in a whole bunch of different ways. If your parents moved a certain way, chances are you'll reflect that movement style. You know, you'll walk like your parents walk. Some of that's your anthropometry, and some of that is, you know, your mirror neurons firing. If you have a bunion on your toe, we see a lot of children who have bunions on their toes because their mom had bunions on their toes. They're like, it's genetic. And I'm like, nope, you've been walking like your mom's walking, right? And simultaneously, let's never, ever not pull out the person in the training process. And I think, unfortunately, that's a little bit what's happened with the advent of the modern programming elitist society, is athletes that feel better perform better. You know, I got beat up by all the physical therapists because I was like, yep, sleep and chronic pain are gnarly and you got to deal with them. And, you know, some of the physical therapists were like, it's not sleep, it's not the problem. And I was like, well, we can't win world championships unless you're sleeping, you know? So we need to make sure that we're managing all of these things. If you don't feel safe, right, in your environment, there's no way you can perform in a safe way or perform at a high level. There was a great documentary with this guy who was world champion free diver. And he says, when I get into a fight or I'm arguing with my girlfriend, I can't hold my breath very long. That's all you need to know about how sensitive the brain is. So when you get culture and people feel safe and they feel respected and they feel like they have ownership and pride, man, you know, it's a lot easier to win in those situations. And why shouldn't it be that 90% or 50% or whatever you want to ascribe to it is this psycho-emotional relationship between coach and athlete and athlete and athlete and athlete and parents? And what I'll say is, if you, not only did your shoulder hurt because your dad issues, but you learn to communicate a certain way and solve a certain set of problems. You know, there was a girl at my daughter's school who is excellent student and, you know, president of the school, and didn't get into early decision into her dream school. And she was destroyed, walked around the campus crying for 2 days. And that's a child who has never had to face adversity and move on and lose or get pinned publicly and have to show up at practice and get better at it. So much of what we, you know, people say, what, like, sport doesn't build character, it reveals it, right? I mean, on and on and on. But if we're really going to get to know someone and ask them to perform at the highest levels, we really have to understand their environment and how they solve problems and what happens when they get under stressful situations. One of the reasons I'm still a CrossFit fan is that it gets potentially very hateful very quickly internally. And look, not CrossFit, but if I put you on the Rogue Echo bike or an assault bike and we start doing intervals, I'm going to find out everything I need to know about you very quickly. I'm going to know how you back off, what your face does, what your breathing patterns change to, how you compensate, how you grimace, how you interact with the athletes around you, right? How you move and transition, how you, like, dude, I have just put in the big test right away with you, and I don't even need to challenge any other thing to know what the heck is going on. So, you know, your point of we need to make sure that we're addressing or understanding the whole person, 100% true. The problem is, if we start with the dad issue, then that can take us off track of what's essential. Because what's essential is biomotor output, range of motion, and winning. That's what's essential here, right? If you get beat because you weren't fit enough or had the wrong genetics, that's your fault. That's okay. Right. But ultimately, as a coach, my job is to help people get to know themselves through sport. And we call this is learning of self through the adversity of sport. It's just not the lessons you think you're going to learn.
go back to your daughters, and you jokingly said, if you're not power snatching, or no dessert, that sort of stuff. But I mean, your daughters kind of grew up in it; they were immersed in it, so they were around it. Um, I guess was there ever a time where that you had to kind of nudge them, or were they always, because they were around it so much, they just they grew up around it, so they've been passionate about it?
No, neither of my daughters are like me. I have probably ADHD, ADD a little bit, and I needed to move early on. I have a big genetic drive to move. We tested that in the genetics. My genetic drive to move is through the roof. My recovery, however, is crap. So I'm like, oh, we're going, let's go. And we'll go play and compete. But the next day I'm trashed and you can do it again. Like, I've cut your hand off, it's regrown, mine is still missing. So I have one daughter who has low drive to move, right? She's just not into it. She'd rather bake and watch Netflix. And that's my oldest daughter, who was captain of her team, all league water polo player. She's the one who back squatting in the garage, right? She started a subscription cookie business as a senior, as a junior, because she was like, I'm not working some lame ass job and I want to make money year round. That's on a subscription model. Started sending cookies all over the nation. We had to nudge and nudge and nudge and nudge. And one of the ways we do that is by saying, which sport or which activity do you want to do? Do you want to go Olympic lifting club? You can lift. Do you want to go to water polo, or do you want to? But there are things that are not optional. You're on swim team, cool. You're going to finish the swim team. You don't have to be on swim team afterwards, but you're going to finish the season on swim team. So a lot of times, I think what we need to do as parents is say, hey, this is what it means to be a human. You need to eat fruits and vegetables, and you have to eat protein. You have to sleep. Those are non-negotiables. Other non-negotiables: learning how to work with other people, be on a team, delay gratification, work hard, suffer, practice in the dark. You got to do all those things. Caroline is now 14 and starting to be more interested in, hey, I think I have some potential and talent. At age 14, again, we just let her choose. What sport do you want to be in? We don't really care. You just need to continue to do that. Now we can say, hey, you need to lift 2 or 3 times a week for 30 minutes at least to support your goaliness. And simultaneously, she's starting to realize, if I want to be jacked and have a flat stomach, I can't eat like a jerk and I should do some deadlifts, right? It starts to reinforce. And what we want to do with all our athletes is get them to buy in and see some kind of result, so that I don't have to constantly sell the program every day. Once the athlete is bought in, then we can have the next conversation. So getting buy-in with your kids, that may take years. In my kids' case, Juliet and I exercise 5 to 7 days a week. We're maniacs because that's how we feel good. But my kids, what we try to do is demonstrate this is what we do. And, the number of world champions in their life and the number of women who have abs and asses and biceps in their lives is everyone. Every woman in their life is pretty much, works hard and can outwork the boys. So we didn't need that model. What we needed to do is just continue to set traps and be consistent until the mechanism starts spinning on its own.
Okay.
It's tricky, man. It's tricky.
Yeah.
And look, I'll let you know when they're 25. I mean, maybe this is all horse crap right now. Right?
Sounds good to me. I'll tell you that.
Well, in addition to that, I always tell friends that are now having kids and stuff, I always say swimming, gymnastics, and a martial art. If you're going to, live vicariously through your kids, or try to, create a super athlete or get a kid a college scholarship. Do you have anything different that you might add to that? Or did that be like a safe prescription in terms of like for movement practices and developing maybe an athlete?
Kids did that, they would slay. Really, if we can make those things. And then you do need to be on a team sport, not like you need to figure out what it's like to be, that kid sucked. That kid took my spot, I think you put a team sport in there eventually of some kind, and you're there all the way, because you need to, as a society, we live and die together as groups. But what you start to see then is, man, if I have this base, then how little more input do I need to have on top of that? Maybe as they start to get older, we throw them in an Olympic lifting club. And, so they speak that movement language. We talk, and you probably see this a lot. Your kids are probably very prepared to go to college and be wrestlers or fighters if they're going to do that. We talk to a lot of parents who's like, hey, my kid got a scholarship. And I'm like, well, how much does, or they say, we got this paper from the college asking them about front squatting and power cleaning, and they don't know what those things are. And so if you're going to have kids move on or continue on in sport, eventually they're also going to need to be able to be competent with a set of dumbbells. And it doesn't mean they need to be Olympic lifters, but they should not be afraid to front squat, and they should have some basic, movement patterning in there because it makes their sport better. So, but if everyone just did those three things, you could retire. I mean, we would kill. That would be amazing.
Obviously, we are fans of your work, all your books, have studied a lot of it. Do you have anything you're working on right now? I know you got the podcast. Anything else you're working on that we should keep an eye out for?
Thank you. We have a brand new, Julie and I've written a brand new book out April 4th called Built to Move. And two things. One, it's sort of the heart that was missing Supple Leopard. What do I do in a 24 hours day that isn't training? Well, how do I move and eat and sleep and manage all those things together? It's really about trying to create a more durable society. We've stripped out the diet and the exercise out of all the things we've learned in the last 20 years and are trying to transform society because we don't need another keto book. We don't need another carnivore shred diet. That's not what we need. And what we find is we need to do a better job as a community of people who are into strength and conditioning, fitness, and play to reach across to our neighbors and our aunties and uncles and say, hey, here's a place to start. If I'm your friend, I'm really overwhelmed and I'm really intimidated by the two of you and your movement and your history, and I don't even know where to start. And so people don't start, and we haven't started. So this book is the book that will make a baseline fitness. If every one of your athletes read this book and did this, they'd be better prepared to receive the bounty of strength and conditioning. And simultaneously, if you gave this book to your, auntie or uncle or someone, you could really get them to start thinking about what it meant to be durable. So that's out. Built to Move is out. I think it's our best work. It's I'm really, really proud of it. It's really good. And then, we're always around. And I just want to say, I really appreciate being able to talk about some other things besides like people's shoulder pain on this podcast. It's so fun.
Kelly, one last thing before we do get rapid fire. You're someone who we've always looked to for inspiration and the books to fix our own problems and that sort of stuff. There's people all over that are checking in with you and what you're doing and what you're putting out there. Who are you checking in with? Like, who are some of maybe your top 3 or 5 favorite follows on social media that you maybe look to for either inspiration or people that you pull from that you're maybe trying some new things?
I'm a big fan of social media because it really allows me to watch a lot of what brilliant minds and people are doing in real time. The best social media accounts are hyper transparent in how they're solving problems. They're showing you the people they're working with, and they're showing you their thinking. And they're trying to do that in an informative way in a minute. It's very difficult. So I won't, call out anyone in specific or specifically, but I'll say that those people have been doing it, they're not just hot and gone. You can see that they're showing you the work that they're doing in real time. They're showing you their bona fides. And I see a lot of people on the net who, they have an iPhone in a gym and they're an expert and they're telling you why the last 20 years of your life is bullshit and doesn't work. I'm like, hey, hang on. There are a few missing steps there. I am part of a cabal of strength and conditioning coaches who are extraordinary thinkers and obsessed. And I don't have any mentors per se. I'm in part of a team of people who are total savage men and women. It's really fun.
Raw liver, yay or nay?
Oh my gosh. What a poor opportunity lost to, we'll just leave it this. Everyone, we're talking about Liver King. It's exactly what's happening with this Republican New York House representative who lied about his resume. Like, at some point, if we keep lying to people, no one will trust anything we say in fitness. People will say, well, I don't believe you that eating better and sleeping more and walking more and, and having better sex will get me there, So anytime this happens and we lose credibility, that's a real problem for everyone. And there should be a bigger penalty for the blatant lies and fraud that happened. That can't happen.
Yeah.
Or we just say entertainment. Like, this is WWE. Cool. It's WWE. Everyone knows it's fake.
I think a lot of us kind of, have been around long enough for like, that doesn't pass the sniff test.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that my kids I didn't follow the Liver King, but my kids did. I didn't want to play in. If he has 2 million followers and people think he's legit, and this is I think you're absolutely right. If you've been around for a second, can I see the people you're working with? Can I see your work? Can I see what's going on? That, I know what elite athletes look like. They don't just eat liver and, back squat a little bit and get jacked. I wish that was the case, because I would be so jacked, but I'm not. Anyway, again, I think neither here or there, whatever you feel about, I'll say the last thing is that when people have really tricky autoimmune disorders or things that look like gut problems with us, we give them two things. We say, here, either go plant paradox and let's simplify, do an elimination diet and pull out things that are just keeping the bell ringing, or you can go carnivore, because it was another elimination diet. And what I feel like is it cast all this negativeness on people who could have benefited from having more collagen and pulling out more processed foods. And now people, it's like, how can you listen to some of the people who are around it? It's difficult to trust. So I think that those things come at a big cost. So I'll just leave it at that. It's too bad.
I agree with you, because before he came out and was even a figurehead of his company, like 2-3 years prior to COVID, I had got those supplements like a couple times and they were really good. I noticed a difference with some of the different thyroid stuff and different like recovery stuff. I noticed it. And then I started seeing him and it kind of just was like, I don't want to support this guy. Like, I like the supplements, but it was like, I can't support someone because this is just not my vibe.
Yeah, that's tricky. Every respectable nutritionist person we know, like, Kate Shanahan is my go-to, Deep Nutrition, great book. But every culture eats meat that's on the bone. They eat collagen, they eat skin, they eat organ meats, they eat bone broth, they eat, bone marrow and organs. And that is a universal. Human beings have been doing that forever. We used to give the meat to the dogs and we ate all the organs and everything else. And that's true, that message gets lost sometimes, or now is lost in the chaos that was all of that entertainment, Too bad. Shame on us. We all watched. We were like, ooh, Liver King, it's so fun. And now we've shot ourselves in the leg.
Yep. Kelly, 4 rapid fire questions.
Oh boy, here we go.
First one I got for you is, are you a coffee drinker?
Heck yeah. Espresso.
All right. Do you have do you go and you get it, or do you have a fancy machine?
I have a fancy machine because I could not afford to take the time off to drink that espresso. If I do drink local espresso, we have an Equator coffee near us that is really, really good. But I drink Stumptown Holler Mountain. That's their basic roast. I have it sent. I haven't found the perfect coffee. This is the most perfect coffee. Stumptown Holler Roast. Stumptown, I'm open for sponsorships.
Airey Bros too.
Phil's,
we love those cold brews.
Are you a Phil's guy, yeah or nay?
Oh, Phil's is great. Phil's is a genius. It's just a different style.
Okay.
Mocha Tesoro, come on. If you don't like a Mocha Tesoro, you don't like life.
Here's our Airey Bros coffee tip for you. There's a company called Third Wave Water. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but oftentimes when we brew coffee at home, we just can't get the right flavor to connect with what we get at our favorite coffee house. And that's because there's a filtration system that, high-end coffee shops use to get a specific mineral profile. So what Third Wave Water does, they took that specific water profile with the minerals in it to make that perfect cup of coffee. Then they've dehydrated that. And what you do is you get like a little, kind of almost like an electrolyte sachet that's got that mineral profile, dehydrated mineral profile, and you put that in distilled water, and then you use that to brew your coffee at home, and that's what gives you that coffee house, brings out all the notes and all that stuff.
In. This is why it's so important. Like I said, I'm part of a tribe of genius men and women who make my life better. Really.
That's right. When everybody does better, everybody does better.
Third wave.
Kelly, do you have a daily practice or any rituals that you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of Kelly Starrett?
Yes, I protect my sleep like it's my job. I do not mess around with my sleep. I go to bed early. I cut off caffeine early, and I try not to drink all the time because it messes up my sleep. You know, weed is legal here in California, and guess what? It'll mess up your sleep. And so, you know, like if you start to prioritize your sleep, man, a lot of things get better. So it all starts with sleep for me.
And in addition to, you know, the cutting out the caffeine early, not drinking, not partaking, do you take any like magnesium supplements, calm, or are you doing anything like that?
I do like magnesium. I'm on the magnesium 3 and 8 by Momentous. Full disclosure, I work for Momentous. I work with Momentous, but I think it's so easy to take magnesium and not. I mean, that's just a no-brainer. And I wear an Aura because I really like to see how all of these inputs. If I sauna too late, my heart rate doesn't come down. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, oh, well, you know, okay. Because if it all starts with sleep for me, as I'm, you know, then I can really start to see and play around with, man, 2 margaritas is too many. 1 margarita, maybe a sip of margarita, killed it. You know what I mean?
Are you going as far as to unplug the router and stuff like that at night too?
From the Wi-Fi smoke, I'm not.
Okay.
But I don't have a router in my room. So there you go.
Okay. Yeah.
Talking of sleep, Kelly, you actually changed the way I sleep. I only sleep on my back because I think it was like your third MWOD video.
Real athletes don't sleep on their stomach.
Yep. That was it. That's all you had to say.
I love it. Well, you know, I may have evolved a little bit, but I still don't think cranking your neck back is going to allow you to have the most movement choice later on. If that's the only way you can sleep, cool. But my athletes are going to whip your athlete's ass.
Here's a quick idea for you too. You know, you mentioned that you have the new book coming out in April. I just came to me a desktop calendar of like quotable KStarr.
Oh man, no one wants that.
I do. I say, you know, like another one is if you can't breathe in a position, you don't own a position.
Oh, I love it. It's so true.
Practice doesn't make perfect.
Practice makes perfect.
Perfect. Yes.
like smooth silk sliding over steel springs. I got them all.
Kelly, what are you listening to right now? Music-wise, podcasts, audiobooks? Are you reading anything?
Yeah, I read about a book a week. It's sort of my maybe a week and a half. I'm reading this book called Indigenous Continent. It's the real story of indigenous person power when the white people came. We just haven't talked about it, but it's pretty remarkable how tenuous the invaders, the colonists' grasp were. And even during the, you know, like late 1600s, we're seeing that like what was going on with the Salem witch trial. There was also a gigantic war happening within 50 miles, and people were living under like intense pressure from this gigantic indigenous war against the colonists. So this book is bananas. And it's one of those things that you're like, oh, let me think differently about, you know, this whole thing.
Do you do audiobooks too, or you strictly hard copy?
Both. I go both.
Both.
Because I can walk or drive or fold the laundry and listen to another book simultaneously.
Are you a music guy when you work out? You have a specific genre that you jam to?
Yeah, it's like EDM. That's what I listen to. It's I never get. Juliet hates it. I don't like dance pop. I don't like to get angry. I just want to feel motion.
All right.
Currently, today was Mansion Air. Mansion Air.
Okay, I'll check that out because I'm an EDM guy myself. Have you ever been to Ibiza?
No. But I'll listen to Yoast and all those kids all day long.
Excellent. Do your kids get down with that stuff too?
They get my music sometimes, but you know, they're into their own things. Okay.
Sweet. Last but certainly not least, does Kelly Starrett have a guilty pleasure?
Oh man, I love sweets. So cookies, my daughter is a world-class cookie chef, but also I love ice cream. Sweets. I have a sweet tooth. And oftentimes I'm under calorie. So my rule, everyone, is I don't eat a sweet before 8 p.m. I don't snack during the day. I don't eat crap during the day. I eat my meals. But sometimes after 8, I'm a little under calories.
Do you have a favorite ice cream? Are you Jenny's? Do you get Jenny's out in California?
Oh, bless your heart. Jenny's is the bomb.
Do you have a favorite flavor?
I love anything Rocky Road, coffee, those things. So I'm a classicist.
Okay.
Classicist.
Right on.
But I won't turn down ice cream, but not like bay leaf. You can have the bay leaf ice cream.
Right on. Respect.
Kelly,
Sweet.
thank you
sir.
so much. Thank you for the work you put out, and thank you for giving us your time this evening. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Gents, stay in touch. Great to see you guys.
Kelly, one last thing before you go. Where can we get those amazing cookies that your daughters make? Is it really, she
It
ship
really is.
all over?
GeorgiasBakeShop.com. She ships all over the nation. World class.
All right, we're gonna get her that Airey Bros bump. It's not quite like the Joe Rogan bump, but hopefully we'll sell.
She'll
sell
take
some
it.
cookies.
She's down. That
Sweet.
kid figured it out. GeorgiasBakeShop.com. Thanks, everyone.
All right, we'll put it in the show notes too. Thank you, sir. Appreciate
Thank
your
you,
time.
guys.
Have a great
Hey,
night.
You too. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, sir.